Isn't that a kid's movie? Just because it's animated doesn't mean it's only for kids. Fine, put it on.
Hello, quick question. Is there a child in the room?
No? Why does that matter?
Well, because there are advertising companies that would like to track you through this TV, and kids being in the room could really mess that up.
How?
It's complicated. In short, there are rules around how children's data can be shared, and with connected TV being a device shared by an entire household, it can be hard to know if a piece of data is associated with a child in that household.
And why is that?
Bring in the experts. I'm not the experts,
But I did talk to some experts in privacy law, ad tech, children's media, and CTV to understand why complying with children's privacy law on CTV can be so complicated, and seems about to get even more complicated. Let's start with the US's Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. Quick refresher, COPA bars companies whose products are directed to children from collecting or sharing a child's personal information without their parents' consent.
Right now, the way the FTC treats kids' privacy is if it's a service that's directed primarily towards kids, you have to comply with the law.
Seems simple enough, right? Well, sure. If it weren't for the fact that CTV is a device shared by an entire household, and streaming services aren't always set up to manage consent for individual members of a household, such as children.
COPPA requires a direct notice to children, to parents when the data is collected regarding kids, and they do state that it should be in the context where the data is being collected. I actually did go and check two of the services that we use. I'm not going to name names. Two popular big services. One we have a profile set up for our kids that's separate from the adult profile, and then other service is doesn't have profiles. It's very child-directed service. So in the first example where we have profiles set up, actually I noticed there is nowhere that I could find a way to opt out of data collection of kids' data. And then the other service didn't have anything in the interface. It basically told me go on your mobile app and look at stuff.
There is a misunderstanding in the industry perhaps today that just because a household is consuming content on the big screen on the TV and you could have parents present in the room, it may be okay to target the parents because you may be, as an advertiser, you may be going after the parents and not the kids because the parents are in the room. And I think that's really the biggest sort of misnomer, because at the end of the day, if you have a service that's directed towards children and families, what you have to do is really cater to the lowest common denominator.
Okay, but let's say a streaming service is trying to comply with the law and has the option for kid-specific profiles. That way, when a kid in the household is watching on a connected TV using that profile, the service doesn't collect any information. Well, what about when someone from the same household is watching under a different profile? And what if, and this part is key to why kids' privacy compliance on CTV can be so complicated, what if one of the pieces of information the streaming service collects is the IP address? The IP address is like a mailing address for your internet. So in a home with Wi-Fi, each device that connects to the Wi-Fi shares the same IP address. As a result, companies can use the IP address to determine that different devices may belong to the same person, or at least the same household. Companies such as credit reporting agencies can even connect it to a person's physical address and/or their email address. Here's a slide from data intelligence company TrueSet that diagrams how the IP address is used as an identity nexus. That slide is part of a study TrueSet conducted with the Coalition for Innovative Media Measurement that showed how IP addresses have been used to link email addresses to postal addresses and cover 90% of the US population. Now, that same study found that roughly half the time those connections are inaccurate. Nonetheless, this ability to use the IP address to connect an email address to a household address helps to explain why laws such as the California Consumer Privacy Act consider the IP address to be personal information.
From a legal standpoint, IP address is considered personal data under several laws, including in California, the state where we're in, the California Consumer Privacy Act. IP address is considered personal data because it's defined as the information not only by an individual, but also like in a household, like at a household level.
Okay, but why does that matter? Like, going back to our example, the streaming service was collecting the IP address from someone using a regular profile, not a kid's profile. That should be fine, right? Well,
let's say you have an IP address, going back to connected TV, you have an IP address, and then you have several profiles, parents, and then like a children. Then the company would arguably know that this subset of data is from children, and then now you have to like have a special handling of those personal information from a children's perspective. So that's where we are, and really interesting as technology evolves.
Persistent identifiers, I think that's a big component of COPPA. It's a personal information, whether you are on a mobile device or a website or a connected TV app. So if you are using persistent identifiers beyond the necessary activities, I think that's a big area that you can actually try to control in a technical scenario.
In other words, the streaming service has a piece of personal information in the IP address that can be associated with everyone in that household. And it knows, thanks to the kid's profile being set up, that there is a kid in that household. So even if that IP address was collected from an adult, does knowing that it can be connected to a child make it children's data?
It hasn't been tested from a legal perspective, like it hasn't been litigated really, but I would err on the side of caution, like if you know that the IP address of this one is connected to a child, then you would handle that specifically.
Fortunately, this children's privacy gray area is getting cleared up, although not necessarily in the way that companies engaging in targeted advertising on CTV may like. California is poised to raise the bar for children's privacy compliance with the California Age-Appropriate Design Code Act.
That has a lot of COPPA components, but also more, where the age is extended to 18 years. And then there are more definitive like risk assessments that are needed for any product that is child-directed.
Among other things, the law specifically calls for companies to assess whether their targeted advertising practices could harm kids. And unlike COPPA, the law does not just apply to companies whose products are directed at kids, but whose products are accessed by kids.
The California law's actual legal threshold is quote-unquote likely to be accessed by children. If you think about it, in PlayStations and the 360 Xbox, it's like highly likely that a child will access that. And then if you think about Roku TV and all the connected TV, that's likely to be accessed by children.
One thing I need to call out though is that the California Age-Appropriate Design Code Act is tied up in the courts right now. It was supposed to take effect on July 1st, 2024, but a federal judge has blocked it, leading California's Attorney General to appeal the ruling. So right now it's in limbo, but it's not the only new legal requirement looking to be levied. Other states are similarly looking to pass new children's privacy laws. And late last year, the US Federal Trade Commission proposed changes to COPPA that would include requiring companies to get parental consent specifically for targeted advertising. Unsurprisingly, the advertising industry isn't super psyched about these changes. In a statement, the Interactive Advertising Bureau's EVP of Public Policy, Lartiz Tiffith, said that, as a result of the FTC's proposal to broaden COPPA's purview, lots of companies will find that they will fall under COPPA than they did previously. And as a result, those companies will need to bear the cost of compliance with COPPA and/or consider significant changes to their operations and businesses to remove potential liability risk under COPPA. Considering everything we've covered in this video though, companies may want to consider making those changes anyway.
The urgency was yesterday because there's so many laws out there now, every state, and they're just more and more are coming. It's very important to really look under the hood to confirm that there is kid streamers on your platform, on your service, on your device, and really look into ways to restrict data collection, ways to definitely stop data sharing, and find ways to get parental consent.